Hello, this video is an introduction of Bahasa Indonesia from the perspective of a native speaker. In this video, I will share my knowledge and observation in learning and using Bahasa Indonesia as a native speaker. If you are interested to learn Bahasa Indonesia as a beginner, this video is a good choice for you. This video is the first video of a series prepared to help you studying Bahasa Indonesia. Enjoy this video. We will start from the vowels. In Bahasa Indonesia, there are 5 vowels: A, E, I, O, and U. For the vowel A, it is always pronounced as A in Bahasa Indonesia. It can appear in the middle of the word, for example, makan, which means to eat. It can also appear at the beginning of the word, for example, anak, which means child. And it can also appear at the end of the word, for example, masa, which means era. The vowel E can be pronounced as a, or e. For A, the examples are meja, which means desk, and sate, which means satai. For E, the examples is ember, which means bucket. For E, the examples are kerja, which means to work, belanja, which means to shop, and empat, which means 4. The vowel I is always pronounced as E in Bahasa Indonesia. For example, izin, which means permission, and pagi, which means morning. The vowel O can be pronounced as O or O, but these two pronunciations are not strict. Both pronunciations can be accepted. For O, the examples are bola, which means ball, and doa, which means prayer. And for O, the examples are doctor, which means doctor, and odol, which means toothpaste. Lastly is the vowel U, which is always pronounced as U in Bahasa Indonesia. The examples are dua, which means two, batu, which means stone, and uang, which means money. Next are the diphthongs. They are two consecutive vowels which are pronounced in the same syllable. In Bahasa Indonesia, normally diphthongs are found at the end of the words. There are 4 kinds of diphthongs in Bahasa Indonesia. A and I pronounced as I, A and U pronounced as au, O and I pronounced as oi, E and I pronounced as a. The examples are pantai, which means beach, pakai, which means to use, danau, which means lake, kerbau, which means buffalo, amboi, which means wow, and survey, which means survey. If the two vowels found in the middle of the word, usually they are not diphthongs. Here are some examples. Lain, which means other or different. Air, which means water. And laut, which means sea. And bau, which means smelly. Other two vowel patterns are not diphthongs. For example, biar, which means to let. Dua, which means two. Keadaan, which means condition or circumstances. The third slide is about consonants. The consonant B is pronounced as B in Bahasa Indonesia. The examples are bisa, which means can or may or poison, and sebab, which means cause. The consonant C is pronounced as C in Bahasa Indonesia. The example is coba, which means to try. I cannot find any word that ends with consonant C in Bahasa Indonesia. The consonant D is pronounced as D in Bahasa Indonesia. The examples are duduk, which means to sit, and murid, which means student. The consonant G is pronounced as G in Bahasa Indonesia. The example is gua, which means cave. I cannot find a word in Bahasa Indonesia that ends with G unless it is end with ng. You will see the examples in the next slide. The consonant H is always pronounced as ha. The examples are hari, which means day, and mudah, which means easy. The consonant J is pronounced as J in Bahasa Indonesia. The examples are jalan, which means to walk or street. The consonant K is pronounced as K in Bahasa Indonesia. The examples are kaki, which means leg or foot, and anak, which means child. If the consonant K appears at the end of the word, it can be pronounced strongly like anak or anak. The consonant L is pronounced as L. The examples are lima, which means 5, and misal, which means example. The consonant M is pronounced as M. The examples are musik, which means music, enam, which means 6. The consonant N is pronounced as N. The examples are nanas, which means pineapple, and delapan, which means 8. The consonant P is pronounced as P in Bahasa Indonesia. The examples are pulau, which means island, and tiap, which means each. The consonant R is pronounced as R in Bahasa Indonesia, R. The examples are raja, which means king, and benar, which means true. The consonant S is pronounced as S in Bahasa Indonesia. The examples are saya, which means I or me, and panas, which means hot. The consonant T is pronounced as T in Bahasa Indonesia. Examples are tujuh, which means 7, and bakat, which means talent. The consonant W is pronounced as W in Bahasa Indonesia. The example is wajah, which means face. I cannot find any Indonesian words which end with W. The consonant Y is pronounced as Y in Bahasa Indonesia. The example is yang, which means which. I also cannot find any Indonesian words which ends with Y. The slide is divided into two parts. The first 5 consonants are single letter consonants, which are mostly found on loanwords from other languages. Consonant F. The examples are faktor, which means factor, and maaf, which means sorry. Maaf is loaned from Arabic. Consonant V. The example is vokal, which means vowel. Consonant Z, which is pronounced as Z in Bahasa Indonesia. The example is zaman, which means era or time. Zaman is loaned from Arabic. Consonant Q rarely appears in Bahasa Indonesia. Consonant X, if a word is loaned from other language and contains X, normally the X will be changed to KS. Example is taxi, which is taken from taxi. The second part are consonants, which is formed from two letters. The first one is N followed by G, which is pronounced as eng. The examples are kucing, which means cat, mangga, which means mango, minggu, which means Sunday or week, and ngarai, which means canyon. Consonant eng, which is N followed by Y. The examples are banyak, which means many, and nyamuk, which means mosquito. Consonant sh, which is S followed by Y. The examples are syukur, which means grateful, and syarat, which means requirement. And lastly, the consonant k, which is K followed by H. The example is khusus, which means special. Thank you very much for listening to this video, and hopefully this video is useful.